I intend to live to about 150, so we'll just see what's possible. And I knew that in order to be able to create the life that I wanted, I was going to need incredible focus, and I was going to have to upgrade my biology to really be at maximum productivity. I didn't know my nutrient statuses from my doctors. I didn't know my gut health status. I didn't know what my total toxic burden was. I like to focus on the foundational health because everybody asks me, what supplements are you doing? Are you doing stem cells? What about gene therapy? And I'm like, okay, guys, we have to focus on mastering the basics first.
Yes.
Before you start thinking about what IVs you should be doing and stem cells and all these other things. When it comes to mitochondrial function, and I'm so glad that you love it too, I think all the basics all contribute to mitochondrial functions. Everything from deep sleep, right? We know that sleep is so incredibly important. Even one night of poor sleep can increase glucose, increase ghrelin, your hunger hormone. The data from what I see, it shows that women need about 11 to 20 minutes more sleep than men. What you're putting into your body is so important for mitochondrial function and exercise. We know that high intensity exercise can really improve the density of the mitochondria, maybe even clear out some of the damaged mitochondria, but I'm also being conscious of when I'm doing that. So I'm doing about 300 minutes of low-level movement throughout the week. And then I do strength training at least 3 times per week. That's intentional strength training. I do a lot of compound lifts and then this high intensity training for mitochondrial health, for improving VO2 Max, which we know is a good measurement of longevity. My doctor had never spoken to me about that, but there are ways to have insight into this. Let's show women what's possible.
Kayla Barnes is a trailblazer in the world of female longevity and biohacking. She's the owner of LYV, the wellness space, dedicated to helping others optimize their health and achieve longevity. Kayla is also the creator and host of the popular Longevity Optimization podcast and the co-founder of the Health Optimization Fund. She's got an unwavering commitment to the pursuit of preventive and regenerative methodologies aimed at optimizing human health. Her endeavors have garnered recognition from many publications, including Forbes, the New York Post, and Vice, and has been named a top longevity leader globally. Kayla is certified by the Amen Clinics in Brain Health and the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. If you have questions about this podcast or your hormones or your longevity or other aspects of your health, please leave us a message over at speakpipe.com/treated. Today, you're going to hear about female longevity, ovarian aging, the role of mitochondria, the recent LA fires and their effects on Kayla, and what's next for her. Hint, it relates to the ovaries. Welcome to Treated with Dr. Sara and our special guest today, Kayla Barnes. Kayla Barnes, it's such a delight to have you with me.
I'm so excited to be here and so excited about your podcast.
Thank you. So I want to begin with what our listeners could expect. Like what could be different in their lives as a result of listening to you today?
So if you're a woman listening to this podcast, I think there might be quite a few things that you can take away. I'm in the longevity industry and own a longevity medicine clinic, and I've spent about the last 10 years in the industry, but at least the last 5 or 6 honing in on unique female-specific protocols. So I've had quite a few findings that I think women listening to this that are just looking to optimize their health now, right, for like vibrant energy, and also looking to potentially increase their lifespan because I've kind of said in some press articles I intend to live to about 150. So we'll just see what's possible. We're living in a super exciting time.
We are, and I like that goal of 150. I don't know. I think there are some indicators that suggest that it's possible. I'm a skeptic, so we're going to spend some time talking about the data today. I also feel like this is important for men too. The longevity space, as you well know, is dominated by research in men, knowledge about men, and then treatment for men. And often it's assumed that the data that we see in men applies to women, and that's often not the case. And so I hope that men will continue to listen to us today as well, because if you know women, if you love women, we all want to grow old together. We want to have that health span, that period of time that we feel fantastic and we're relatively free of chronic disease to be as long as possible.
Yeah.
So, what got you interested in female longevity?
This has been a slow build. Now there's a lot of, press about my hyperbaric chamber at home and the clinic that I've kind of built at my house, but it started slow. I mean, I started studying nutrition in college, and that was the first kind of spark, right? I mean, I did not grow up on a healthy diet whatsoever. Very standard American diet. I mean, things that I ask my mom now, I'm like, what were you thinking? What the Pop Tarts, the toaster strudels, all the things. And I just had my eyes open and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And along that same time, I started my first company. So I've always been an entrepreneur. I started my first company at 17, 18 years old. Had no idea what I was doing back then, but I was definitely committed to creating an amazing life for myself. And I knew that in order to be able to create the life that I wanted, I was going to need incredible focus and I was going to have to upgrade my biology to really be at maximum productivity. So started with just swapping out some different foods and eating healthier. I did a lot of sports as a kid, so I maintained the exercise regimen and started to just learn more about it. I, did Dr. Daniel Amen's programming for the brain, and that really, turned on a light in my head. I'm like, wow, we're thinking about the body so much, but what about the brain? And I think oftentimes we think about the brain so much later because we start to forget our keys or, become more forgetful. So that was a great learning. And then when I went to go open the clinic, about 5 years ago, I started the research. We opened 4 years ago, but I got deep into the lab. So I started getting on calls with all the lab companies, clinicians, what they were doing, their protocols, the outcome. We have a lot of interesting therapies at my clinic. So we have a multi-person hyperbaric chamber. We do, NAD, customized IV therapies. We do EBOO, which is super high dose ozone. We're going to be rolling out like a type of plasmapheresis. We do methylene blue. We have a red light bed, so it looks like a tanning bed, but it's like full body red light exposure. We have an ozone sauna, which is super unique. And I started to go through all the trainings for these different devices. I was talking to the labs. We were determining what labs to bring in. I started doing them all on myself. And I just realized, I was like, wow, my doctors have never done anything like this. I didn't know my nutrient statuses from my doctors. I didn't know my gut health status. I didn't know what my total toxic burn was or, any of these more in-depth labs that we're looking at now, right? Like, well, how is your mitochondria functioning? My doctor had never spoken to me about that. But there are ways to have insight into this. And so I just got obsessed. I was like, this is amazing. I have areas to improve. And, I have a medical team behind me. So we have a medical doctor on staff who reviews all my protocols. I also have a physician's assistant that also reviews my protocols. We have nurses and MAs. So I was like, let's just see what's possible here. I have all this data, and you and I know at this time in life, it's expensive, right? So I'm like, why don't I do all the labs because I have access to them now that I own this clinic, and I do all these different protocols and just put the data out there. Let's show women what's possible. And in the beginning, it was more women and men as I was building my following. But then I'm like going down these roads of looking at kind of for men by men protocols and even a lot of the research done on men for men. And I started to see some trends go in the wrong direction. So I was all excited about the data. I was doing these amazing protocols. And I'm sure we'll get into what I was doing and where it kind of went wrong when I was doing a more, as I say, for men by men protocol. Because, I'm sure you know her, but Dr. Stacy Sims has a great quote that, women are not small men.
That's right.
And I realized that pretty quickly into this venture. So yeah, it's been a long build, but now I have done so many of the really cool, I like to focus on the foundational health because everybody asks me, what supplements are you doing? Are you doing stem cells? What about gene therapy? And I'm like, okay, guys, we have to focus on mastering the basics first before you start thinking about, what IVs you should be doing and stem cells and all these other things. I think it's great because I think it can get you from, the 95% up to like the maybe 100%. But these practices that, you and I will talk about, they are low cost and a lot of times free. And they just require, putting the discipline in and the protocols into place in your own life to master them. and then maybe explore some of these other really exciting therapies.
Well, I love that you are starting with the basics
Yeah.
because I agree with you. I feel like things like your nutritional status, your gut function, your um, what's going on with your air quality, your environment,
Mm,
what's happening in terms of detoxification pathways,
yeah.
methylation, oxidative stress, inflammation. Those are foundational.
Yeah.
And I do see a lot of people who go for the shiny new object and, they're getting exosomes and yet they haven't figured out the right food plan for them.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about the basics first. You also mentioned mitochondria,
Yeah.
which is an area that I've become completely obsessed about because I feel like, especially for women, there's
Hmm.
some differences when it comes to the mitochondria. There are things that women experience that men don't experience that can impair the mitochondria. So, when you're starting with the mitochondria, either for yourself or for the the clients that come to your clinic, where do you begin?
Yeah. So I'll mostly talk about what I do in my protocol and my personal experience.
And I love this because in precision medicine, the N of one
Yeah.
experiment, I was taught at Harvard, is the highest form of evidence.
Mm,
It is better than the randomized trial because it is giving you data that's precise for you,
yeah.
not for a population. Otherwise, you get medicine for the average.
Yeah.
That's what a
Exactly.
randomized trial gets you.
Totally. And in my clinic, every single protocol is probably gonna look a little different because we will start with something, it depends on everyone's budget and how deep they wanna go, but oftentimes we'll start with your genetics and see what your genetic predispositions are combined with your family history, and then talk about your symptoms because instead of maybe doing all of the tests, we wanna target for people what we should look at first, and that can just be so different for everyone. So, I try to be really explicit that this is for me. And I try to be really explicit even when talking about supplements that it's based on my own data because my data guides everything that I do. So when it comes to mitochondrial function, and I'm so glad that you love it too, I think all the basics all contribute to mitochondrial function. So, I mean, everything from deep sleep, right? We know that sleep is so incredibly important. Even one night of poor sleep can increase glucose, increase ghrelin, your hunger hormone. And women, from what I have found, the data is really interesting, and I would love to hear your thoughts too. So, the data from what I see, it shows that women need about 11 to 20 minutes more of sleep than
Yes,
men.
absolutely.
But I think so I've been fortunate enough to be able to go to bed naturally and wake up naturally, just given my schedule and the fact that I'm doing this testing. And I found my husband thrives on, about 7 hours. I need about an hour more of sleep than him
Yes.
most days and even sometimes more when I'm menstruating. So, I mean, that's one, I think, big difference right there that I'm excited and hopeful that the studies play out that women don't need to push themselves to wake up at the same time as their partner or the studies that say are is good for men. I found that I definitely need more sleep.
I want to emphasize this point because it's a critical takeaway. And I was talking to the chief science officer at Aura about these data in particular.
Mhm,
And I was asking him because we know from the Aura data that women sleep more than men.
mhm,
And then the question is, what about recovery? So, in terms of the same level of readiness, the way
mhm,
that Aura scores it, a composite metric of um, multiple different indicators from a wearable, like your body temperature and your what's happening with your sleep and your heart rate variability. We know that to get to the same level of readiness and
mhm.
recovery, women need more sleep.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there's this myth that it's equal.
Mhm,
And so then women are not getting sufficient sleep. Like I'm similar to what you described. If I sleep less than 8 hours, I don't feel as good.
mhm,
And I use Neat Sleep and I, use other things that help me with optimizing
mhm.
my sleep, but I think it's really important to give yourself the grace of more sleep. So that's a really important takeaway for the men and the women who are listening.
Absolutely. And the thing is if we went off just the research, 11 minutes more, I mean, that's not going to be that helpful. So that's why I think that these N of 1 experiments are really important because when I wake up naturally, it means my body's fully rested, right? So that's been a big takeaway for me because in the past, I used to, want to make sure that I got just the quote unquote right amount of sleep based on the research. And I have now found that that is not quite accurate. So I think that's a big one. But I think sleep for, mitochondrial health is a big one as well as nutrition. Nutrition can be so polarizing on the internet. It's like vegan or carnivore, plants will kill you, and then plants are the best. But I've just gone off, what the data says. I think a Mediterranean diet essentially is one of the most studied diets. So I just focus on single ingredient foods. I try not to make it too complicated. As they say, shop in the perimeter of the store where the single ingredients are, like avocado, one ingredient, spinach, one ingredient, wild caught fish, one ingredient. And I really try to focus on quality because I have a concern, and we can talk about the total tox burden of this glyphosate exposure. It's a known carcinogen at this point. It's so heavily used. It's almost impossible. Even I have some glyphosate on my total tox burden, and I really haven't eaten a piece of inorganic food in at least the past 7 years. I go way out of my way to do organic, biodynamic when possible, reducing microplastics, which, I think is a big issue for women as well, and would love to dive into that. But nutrition, our parents told us, our mom said to us, you are what you eat. And it's so cliche, but I think of food as making up my cells. So every time I eat something, I'm like, do I want to be made of Doritos or do I want to be made of wild blueberries and wild caught salmon? I mean, what do we think is going to make us perform better?
It's such a good point. And, it's a thrill to talk to you, Kayla,
Mm,
because you and I both know our glyphosate levels. And I'm also someone who eats entirely organic.
mhm,
Occasionally, I'll have a glass of wine, and I feel like that's probably my exposure to glyphosate.
mhm.
So, even organic products sometimes are contaminated, cross contaminated
Yeah,
with glyphosate. And we know that that's one of the ways that you can get increased intestinal permeability and
yeah,
leaky gut. It's got biochemical effects in the body. And it's like most chemicals, it's presumed innocent until proven guilty, which I think is the wrong way to
mhm,
approach the toxins that we get exposed to. But it's just such a thrill to talk to someone who is doing a time series
mhm.
of looking at toxic load and doing these N of 1 experiments to see what makes a difference. And I really appreciate the simplicity with which you're talking about a food plan because a lot of people get confused
Mhm.
and then they just reach for the Doritos because it's
Yeah.
hard to make sense out of it all. So I like this whole foods approach that you're talking about, single food.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not too complicated. You can, fast food to me is like an apple, right? Like fast food is definitely not a drive-through. It's like there are foods that are quick and easy and that you can prepare for. So nutrition is a big one. Also, I love, like healthy fats and fermented foods. There's quite a bit of extra virgin olive oil in my diet. And we know that our brains thrive off that. It's great for our hormones, right? One interesting thing related to kind of nutrition is when I first started, I wanted to be on a, pretty significant caloric deficit because we know in mice that it's one of the most proven things to extend their life, right? In mice. And when I was doing that, I'm super dedicated. If I tell myself I'm going to do something and I put it into my protocol, I'm going to do it. So I was doing it. I was lean, all of that, but I was watching, hormone imbalances start to creep up as a woman. So I think that's another, big difference in men and women because I was doing it too much. Not to say, so I do fasting. I do it now in my follicular phase and I do less of it because I saw not only my hormones becoming a little imbalanced, but I also saw my thyroid function decreasing with all of these, say hermetic stressors, right? So fasting is a hermetic stressor. It can be good for you and create resilience, increase resilience over time. But as women, we have to be so careful, I think, because of this, 28 to 30-day cycle in which things are changing so much. I mean, men, it's like Groundhog Day, right? It's like same thing over and over.
This is a profound point because, I mean, first of all, caloric deficit, yes, so well proven. Very few people can do it. So hats off to you that you were able to do it. I would say over the female lifespan, when you're menstruating, you just talked about the follicular phase, which is the first 14 days if you've got a 28-day cycle versus the second 14 days of the cycle. You were talking about fasting in the follicular phase. And what I see with caloric deficit in women is that if you get below, the threshold is individual, but for women who get below like 1,300 kilocalories a day or 1,200 kilocalories a day, they're less likely to have the LH signal, the luteinizing hormone signal, which I think is what you're referencing. And then they start to have hormonal issues. They may not ovulate. They may have lower estrogen levels. They may find that their thyroid becomes dysfunctional because your thyroid it's got this interdependence with cortisol and with a number of other factors. And especially those of us who tend to do a Mediterranean diet, but more of a low carb approach to the Mediterranean diet, that can cause more stress in the female body and raise cortisol, cause issues with not making as much serotonin, not sleeping as well, thyroid dysfunction. It can affect your menstrual cycle for the reasons we just talked about. So I wanted to call that out. And it's not just for menstruating women. I think it's also an issue for women who are in perimenopause and menopause that we want to make sure that we've got these hormones and neurotransmitters working for us, not against us, so that we're getting the sleep, the foundational sleep, and the thyroid's working well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I was seeing. The thyroid function was declining so much. My doctor was like, maybe we'll think about thyroid meds. And like, or maybe I think about eating more,
Right.
it made more, that made a lot more sense. So that was a big difference too. But yeah, I think, nutrition, of course, what you're putting into your body is so important for mitochondrial function. And exercise. I mean, I have an interesting, workout split, but we know that doing a little bit of high intensity, and that's why it's, from what I've found, it's been such an interesting balance because we know that high intensity exercise, right, can really improve the density of the mitochondria, maybe even clear out some of the damaged mitochondria. But I'm also being conscious of when I'm doing that. So I'm doing I'm doing about 300 minutes of low level movement throughout the week. And that's mostly for me, well, before the fires, and we'll talk about that, but that was just walking with my husband. I live in the hills, so it's a little bit of zone 2 as well, which is nice. And then I do strength training at least 3 times per week. That's intentional strength training. I do a lot of compound lifts because I'm in my mind, I'm thinking about bone density, right? So we want to be like loading the bones. If you're just starting out with compound lifting, I would recommend working with a trainer or something because you can get hurt and you don't want to do too much too fast. But really thinking about that. And then this high intensity training for mitochondrial health, for improving VO2 max, which we know is a good, measurement of longevity. So I'm doing 2 sessions of VO2 max training, but it's a slightly modified. So instead of the 4x4, which is really standard, and I think probably works great for men and some women, I'm doing like a 4x6. So I'm doing a 4 minutes of all out and then a 6 minute of recovery 4 times. And it's been amazing to see. So, the cardiovascular age on the Oura Ring. So I just started implementing this VO2 intentional training about a month and a half ago. And according to Oura, my heart age went from -9 down to a -11.5.
Wow.
Over the course of about this month and a half of doing this intentional VO2 training. But I am being conscious of not doing too much VO2 and super high intensity in my luteal phase and after ovulation because of the reasons that we said. So I think it's, there's so many ways that women really are different than men. And I'm glad that I figured all this stuff out. And it's an ongoing, learning experience, of course, but I'm glad that I've now refined my protocols. But I think, getting that high intensity training at certain points is important for mitochondrial function as well.
Kayla, can we map this to your body composition? Because I
Yeah.
imagine you're also tracking that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us about maybe when you first started checking your body composition, what's happened with your muscle mass, what's happening with your fat mass. What are your goals?
Yeah, I mean, my goals are really for longevity. Of course, having a nice body in the meantime is a huge perk, and I'm sure my husband loves it. But I've been pretty lean. I'm usually about 19 or so BMI, but I also don't want to get too low. I've been a little bit lower than that when I was doing caloric restriction, and this was like a little bit of a red flag. So for me, my goal is always so at home I have a withing scale, which is great because and we can talk about all the at-home measurements I do because they're pretty cheap and easy. But I have a withing scale, and it's great because it shows you your body composition in terms of others' body composition. It shows you where you're trending. So your weight might not really change because there's been times, I actually had an explant earlier this year and I didn't train as hard. So my weight didn't really change, but I saw that my fat mass was going up, my muscle mass was going down, right, during that time. But my goal is always to basically be in the high range for my age and height and sex of muscle mass for sure, and always be on the lower range of, fat mass. So I find, 19, 20 for me works pretty well. My husband and I do intend on trying to get pregnant later this year. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Oh, being married, I say is like the best biohack ever.
Isn't it true?
Yeah.
As long as you have the right partner,
Yes.
that's critical.
Yes. Well, I don't know if you've seen the headlines, but I sent my husband all these labs to do before our first date. And I was probably like the most unconventional woman he's ever met because we had our first date in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber.
I can see the book. I can see the book that you're writing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then I put him in an ozone sauna. I'm like, this guy is either going to run for the hills or be totally into it. And
or he'll stay for life.
Yeah. And he did. So, choosing the right partner is so important. But so body mass is a great thing to track at home. At the clinic, we have like an in-body machine. And, I also like looking at DEXA for things like bone density. My goal is always to have as high as possible muscle mass because I want to think for the future, right? We know when menopause comes, and really at any age, it's going to make it more difficult to put on more muscle mass and strengthen the bone. So I'm trying to go into that phase of life. I'm 34. I turned 34 in November. So I'm trying to go into that phase of life incredibly strong and, a nice body composition. And the thing is at this point, I really don't even track calories because I've also done it so much that I pretty much know.
Sure.
But I'm not hungry. I'm not, craving foods. And that's the thing about, right, these man-made foods that are developed and designed to make you want to eat more of them. I don't even know because it's been so long and my taste buds are now retrained. Like the first part of it when you switch, I think could probably be hard. But after a few months, to me, everyone's like, what's your cheat meal? What's your cheat meal? It's like literally blueberries or cherries or something. But I crave that and it tastes amazing to me because my taste buds no longer even know what like a Snickers bar tastes like or something like that.
It's such good information because a lot of people don't realize that taste buds turn over about every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So once you start eating differently, yes, there's a willpower element to it. You have to be disciplined about it. But going forward after that 2 weeks, it's so much easier because these are the whole foods, the single ingredient foods that you start to crave.
Totally.
So you mentioned a couple of things that I want to pick up on.
Yeah.
You mentioned the explants.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that. You also talked about how, as you were recovering from the surgery, you had a change in your body composition, which I think is relatable for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say that, yes, menopause is, you want to prepare and you want as much, investment in the bank account as possible before you hit menopause. But I would also say that perimenopause is when it starts to change.
Yeah.
And that can be 35 to 45.
Yeah.
So what we know after 40 is that you gain about 5 pounds of fat, you lose about 5 pounds of muscle every decade.
Wow.
So you're right that you want those numbers to be the best that they can possibly be before you hit perimenopause. And so tell us whatever you're willing to share about explantation and why you decided to do that. I imagine some of the reasons. And then what you've noticed with your body comp since then.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I got implants super young. My mom had them. It was like, I don't know, it seemed like a natural thing to do. My mom's like, "Oh, and then you'll, get some boobs and then, meet a husband and stuff." And so I was like, "Okay." And, I mean, I wanted to feel super feminine too, so I got them. I got them when I was about 18, I think. So I had them for a long time. I was measuring all my labs and, thankfully I didn't have any symptoms of, what we now know. And I'm not sure your opinion on it, but breast implant illness. So much new research and data is coming out on this, but I didn't really have any symptoms because I was doing my tox burden. I was doing all my labs. Everything was fine.
Did you have a positive anti-nuclear antibody?
No, I
No.
didn't. I don't
Good.
have any autoimmune conditions or
Great.
anything of that nature, but for me, it just didn't feel aligned anymore. Also, I haven't even mentioned this, but, I don't think you're really supposed to be doing chest exercises, and I was doing some pull-ups and stuff, so I felt like one had kinda shifted, and it just didn't feel aligned for me anymore. I'm constantly thinking about microplastics and then having the plastic in my body. I'm like, "Ugh, I don't think I want this anymore." So and also for me, I know you can breastfeed with implants, but I know that me and my husband are gonna try, and it just felt like what made the most sense for me. I have 0 judgments whatsoever of anyone having them, and, I'm interested to see where the research goes because we just don't know that much about it yet. So I went ahead and did that, and, I'm super glad that I did. I saw it from a body composition, and not too much if I'm being totally honest, because I've had such a disciplined routine, so I had a pretty good body comp going into it and now after. I mean, I am a little bit of a lower weight actually because of the implants being gone, but
Right.
it's still pretty stable. But I'm still really glad that I did that and excited to see where we really learn about this because I think it's so early, but it also seems to be a big thing. I mean, there's some people that I know that have publicly come out and said that their implants were leaching or leaking
Yes.
or, I got scared too to do sauna because I'm obsessed with
Right.
sauna.
Right.
And then I was getting worried about the implants and the sauna and potentially leaching. So I just decided to get them out.
It sounds like absolutely the right choice for you. It was proactive rather
Hmm.
than reactive
Yeah.
since you didn't have uh, signs or symptoms of breast implant illness. And maybe what we'll do in the show notes is link to some of these different things that we're talking about, like
Yeah.
measuring body comp, how you can do that, some of the testing
Hmm.
that can be helpful to look for breast implant illness,
Yeah.
the tox testing that you do, which I want to get to
Yeah.
next. And I just was together with Mel Robbins and talking about her experience with explantation, and she actually had symptoms.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the first things that you can sometimes see is a positive anti-nuclear antibody.
Hmm.
And my last book is about autoimmune disease and autoimmunity, which I feel like is hitting epidemic
Yeah.
proportions now, with 30% of us now having positive anti-nuclear antibodies. I'm glad you're one of um, the group that does not have positive antibodies.
Yeah.
So
And aren't 80% roughly of autoimmune conditions women?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, a lot of reasons for that.
Mhm.
But I certainly think that there are issues related to the X chromosome. There's also hormone specific reasons like
Mhm.
pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and menopause. There's those are the sex differences, but then there's the gender based differences, like
Mhm.
the emotional labor that women tend to be more responsible for, the higher rate of stress, the higher rate
Mhm.
of trauma,
Yeah.
especially sexual trauma that occurs earlier
Mhm.
in women. So tell us about the kind of tox testing you do. So you
Yeah.
mentioned Vibrant Labs. I'm just curious about what kind of tests you do, how often you do it, what have you seen since
Yeah.
the first time you did it?
Yeah, so I do the total toxic burden test by Vibrant Wellness, and it combines environmental toxins, molds and mycotoxins, and heavy metals all into one lab. And I find it incredibly beneficial. And I think that we know now that women are actually exposed to more toxins through a lot of different things, but like personal care products and fragrance and makeups and all of the things that we apply versus men. So I think this could be a really helpful lab for women to run if you have access to it.
And I haven't seen any other lab that offers a test like this. And I just want to pick your brain here for a minute because I always like to give a couple of options
Mhm.
with laboratories. You know,
Yeah.
if you want to check your hormones, you could do a Dutch test. You could also
Mhm.
do a Genova test. But this is one of the situations where I haven't seen another lab.
I think that you might be able to piecemeal together some things from other labs, but I've had conversations with other labs too. And honestly, it's the best one that I can find that combines all of these together, which from a high level, I want to know all of them, right? Because there's so environmental toxins, where are we getting them from, and heavy metals and the link to, neurodegenerative disease. Like I want to know all of these things. And so kind of the journey has been so yeah, it's the best one that I know of. But if I find anything else, I'll definitely send it to you and
Please.
we can
Yes.
post it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So I've seen some big changes since living in Ohio and then moving to California. So I moved after I got married. So in probably September or so of last year. So I've been in California for about a year and 4 or 5 months. And I do my Tox Burden every quarter. So I'm doing, about 4 of them a year, which is really nice because again, it's a test that is not super easy to access. And I get to see any little changes, pretty much. So when I moved from Ohio to California, we're renting. I had previously had whole home water filtration. And then, of course, I have like reverse osmosis drinking water. I mostly drink spring water out of like glass bottles at this point. But I saw, yeah, exactly like we're drinking here. I saw an increase in toxins, not massive, but enough to see movement. And so I looked at the
You
water
saw an
supply
increase when you moved from Ohio to
to
Los
California.
Angeles.
Yeah. And after a couple months of being there. And I'll preface it with, we have an inordinate amount of air filtration. So we have like
Which we're going to get to,
yeah.
especially post fires.
Yeah. So, we have like 6, Jaspers, like HEPA and carbon filtration in the home. I don't have things like rugs. It was an interesting conversation. My husband loved rugs. And then I explained like, rugs can harbor bacteria and mold and might have these VOCs. We have an organic bed and organic sheets. And even my clothing, I'm really trying to move towards all natural fibers because we know that glyphosate can be sprayed on the cotton and then the polyester and you're working out and it's seeping in. So I'm really thinking a lot about this stuff, the organic food, all of the things. So anyways, I started to see some of these toxins just move up, a little bit. And then I looked at the EWG, the local tap water database, and I saw what was in the LA water. And then I saw,
And for those listening who don't know, EWG, it's Environmental Working Group.
yeah, and they're a great resource. I love them. Do you like them?
I love them.
Yeah, they're a
I
great
love their
resource.
Skin Deep, their
Yeah,
process of rating
totally.
skincare products.
Yep, I love that and, use it all the time.
I
And
try to
so,
stay at a 3 or less.
yeah, that's good. Always in the green zone. And so I saw those toxins start to creep up. And I also forgot to mention, but I also have just standard, small water filters for the showers. But the problem with those that I've come to find out, like they do a pretty good job filtering out chlorine, but a lot of these other issues like, toxins or heavy metals, things of that nature, the small filters just don't seem to be quite cutting it. So,
Fluoride? I imagine they don't get fluoride.
yeah, I don't think that, well, I don't really have too much fluoride on my Tox Burden, but I'm not sure about the efficacy of fluoride with those filters. They all differ a little bit. I found one that seems to be a bit better. I can send you the name of it
Please.
from a rating system that I kind of subscribe to. But long story short, I now know like I need the whole home water filtration. And I mean, at minimum, if you can only do a shower water filter, I would totally do that over having none. But I think the water that we're showering in, not only can it, seep in transdermally, but also it's steam, and then you're breathing it in through the lungs. So that's an area. I mean, a big area, it's kind of a funny story. So when it comes to parabens, my husband, I have all these products for him to take to the gym, and he does these tests on the same cadence that I do. And so all of a sudden I get his new total tox burn back and his parabens have like shot up. And I'm like, honey, what's going on here? Are you not using the stuff I gave you? He's like, well, I just decided to start using the products at the gym because it was faster. And I'm like, okay, let me show you. So I print out his previous and I print out his new. And do you see this metric here? The parabens, they just shot up. And it's a nice gym too. I mean, it should theoretically have like kind of healthy products. But it's all of these little nuances that I think if you're not aware of the toxic exposures, like you could be living next to something that is giving you toxins. Just the other day, my neighbors were fumigating their homes. So I made sure to keep all the doors closed, and the Jaspers really kicked up, but it could be makeup. I mean, I got rid of like traditional fragrances years and years and years ago. I use like a little essential oil or something of that nature. There's some brands out there that are good too. But I think understanding this toxic load for women is so important. I mean, I've seen research now. I think there's definitely a link, and would love your opinion on autoimmune conditions and like high levels of environmental toxins over time. But also I've seen some data on decreasing AMH with high levels of environmental toxins,
Yes.
anti-Malarian hormones. So that's related to fertility. We also see the fertility rates just, really moving in a negative direction at this point. And it's something that's really on my mind. So yeah, I think the environmental toxin and the heavy metals, the total tox burden is great. And depending on if I make changes or move or even am exposed to something, I travel a lot just like you do. We're speaking at an event this weekend together at Luminescence. So that'll be really fun. But you can get exposures. You travel and sometimes I rarely eat out at restaurants and I don't drink alcohol. But, from time to time, you just don't know what you're going to be exposed to. So I like having this quarterly cadence of seeing what's changed.
Such a good point, because unless you're measuring, you don't know about the exposures. And I really appreciate the story with your husband who was
Yeah.
using the products at the gym, because I had a similar experience where I was only using organic makeup. I was only using organic skincare.
Mhm.
I was only using organic clothing for a year, which is very hard to do.
Very hard. Yeah.
And you look a little different than you
It's
do
yeah,
wearing
most
toxic clothing.
it's kind of like a moo a little bit, but
The organic clothes. We need to like up the quality and the aesthetic.
yes.
But one of the things I found, someone gave me some MAC lipstick and it was
Mhm.
a beautiful color. I started wearing it and my lead level went up.
Mm.
And it's only with testing that you see, oh, conventional lipstick is a really common source of lead.
Yeah.
It wasn't my drinking water. I think it
Mhm.
was the lipstick.
Wow. Yeah,
So that kind of testing, I think, is really valuable.
absolutely. And I mean, imagine this was like one lipstick for you. It was one non-whole home water filtration for me. And it really does make a difference. And I think also, I do a lot of sauna too, which I really love because I think it's important for women to help detox. So, plus there's so many cardiovascular benefits and reduced risk of all-cause mortality. So that's kind of like, let's say you have toxins or you're listening to this. I think that might be one thing to maybe implement. And also my diet has a lot of like cruciferous vegetables. I love broccoli sprouts. I love sulforaphane to really, increasing fiber to really just help our bodies detox because it's at the end of the day, it's almost impossible. If I'm doing all of these things and I still have a little bit of glyphosate and, there's these metrics that are moving, it's like we really just need to be detoxing too because it's so pervasive, these toxins and what's in our environments. We should definitely do the best we can to reduce them, but also just, I think actively detoxing is helpful in that too.
Agree. I feel like detoxification used to be optional,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
a nice thing to have. Now I feel like it's required, it's
Yeah.
essential.
I
And
agree.
I also love saunas. And I'm thinking right now about the best data that we have on how it reduces all-cause mortality, it reduces cardiovascular mortality. Most of that data is in men.
Yeah.
We don't have as much in women. And yet, um, because women are more exposed to toxins
Mm-hmm.
through skincare products and also work exposures, we've got
Mm.
more women in healthcare as an example.
Yeah.
I feel like it's such an important piece. And I'm curious if you could talk a bit about your sauna protocol, sort of what you do. I grew up going to saunas
Mm-hmm.
and had one in my house. So it's always been part of what I do. I'm just curious, how much time do you spend? What do you do when you're in the sauna? Because I
Mm-hmm.
imagine you might be multitasking.
Yeah, I sure am.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. So first I'll talk a little bit about an interesting fact that I've come to realize about infrared saunas most specifically. But a lot of sauna companies actually use via wood glues in the sauna. It can be high EMF. They could use varnishes. So it's really interesting that some saunas are not as healthy as you think they are. So, I found this company, Heavenly Heat Sauna, and they started making saunas for people with chemical sensitivities. So they don't use any wood glues, and there's, the lowest VOCs on the market. There's actually a Faraday cage, which can block EMFs built into the sauna. So I think you should, if you're going to be investing in a sauna, you should do your research and find one that is focused on these things. I sleep in a Faraday cage too. We can talk about that. One headline I think was like, woman wants to live to 150, sleeps in cage. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I saw some of those headlines on your social. They're hilarious.
It's so funny. So funny. Sleeps in cage. I'm like, oh my goodness. But going back to my sauna protocol. So I do sauna 5 times a week. I love it. Sometimes I do it with my husband as like a wind down too. So then we have connection time. But I'm in there for about 19 to 22 minutes. I think most of the data on sauna, which you already pointed out was done in men, but it's at about 176 Fahrenheit to 212, about 20-ish minutes around there. So I try to, base it off of that.
And that's for a dry sauna.
That's for a dry sauna. Yeah. So that's a much higher sauna. So my infrared sauna only goes to 165. So I tend to spend a little bit more time in there. So, somewhere around 20 to 22 minutes. And I'm just trying to, get the same benefits because we do have a dry sauna too that I used to use. So we have 2 saunas. But now I'm using the infrared sauna because it has built-in red light therapy. So it has red light panels actually inside of the sauna. So instead of doing my red light panel therapy and my sauna separately, I'm now able to do both, which is great because when we talked about mitochondrial health, in the beginning, I think red light therapy can be a nice tool to help improve mitochondrial health. So
can you take us through that? Tell me about red light therapy. Like, what's the science on it? What do we know? What do we not know?
Yeah, I mean, it's still emerging, but what we do seem to know is that it can benefit the skin topically through, maybe boosting collagen and elastin a little bit, wound healing. A lot of people use it for hair. I have a hair protocol, like a hair cap that I wear. And I noticed the other day, I've just been doing it for about a month, but I have all these new hairs like poking out all over the place. So, potentially, some hair growth too. But then the infrared light, they say it can penetrate into the mitochondria and help improve mitochondrial health, which if you even think about our ancestors and how we, evolved, they spent a lot of time outside and there is red light in the sun. So it makes sense to me that it could be beneficial to overall human health because we've gotten away from the natural light sources, right?
Yes.
And I'm definitely not saying to spend all of your time outside and then you get photo damage, but we are completely disconnected from our circadian rhythms. I mean, the first thing I do in the morning is get sun in the eyes. And then I also see the sunset later in the day. We actually picked our house because we get a great view of the sunset so it can further anchor that circadian rhythm.
But so this is critical. And I just want to connect it also to mitochondrial health.
Mm-hmm.
It's so critical for getting that signal, the main hormones that are involved, as you well know, with circadian rhythms are melatonin and cortisol.
Yeah.
And so that morning light exposure really helps you with melatonin and cortisol, and it also helps your mitochondria.
Yeah.
And it's free.
And it's free, exactly. And there's also red light in the sun throughout the day. So it makes sense to me that if we were disconnected from that, now we're seeing more mitochondrial dysfunction. It makes sense. So that's what I know of red light therapy. So I'm definitely willing to try it. I'm in the group of people who want to master the basics, but then also want to just push the limits. So I'm doing red light therapy. I'm doing it 3 or 4 times a week. So I'm not turning on the red light panel every time I'm in because there is some emerging data that we kind of need a bit of time in between sessions to allow our body to really process that light. So
how much time?
Some studies say 1 day or 24 hours. I think it kind of depends on what you're using it for too. So if I'm using it for just mitochondrial health, I'm usually giving about a day break. So I'm only doing it probably 3 times a week for a longer session. So sauna.
This is a good point, Kayla. So one of the things I've noticed over my 30 years of taking care of patients is that pulsing often is the right way to go.
Yeah.
And I feel like, it's true. It's certainly true when it comes to other forms of hormesis or positive stress.
Mm-hmm.
There's, for And about 40% of your recovery, like from athletics and exercise, is genetically determined.
Mhm.
So that kind of recovery so that you get the most out of the red light therapy, I think
Yeah.
is a important point.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely, like, changed my stance on that. I was doing in the beginning, I was just doing everything too much. I was so excited about it. I was doing everything too much, cold plunging too much. We can talk about that, how I've modified my cold plunging routine as a woman that I find it to be far more beneficial now. But yeah, so I'm doing the red light in the sauna, doing the sauna 5 times per week at about the 20 to 22-minute interval. I do some dry brushing while I'm in there too. I always try to like bio stack or habit stack. So I'm doing multiple things. So get, some dry brushing for the lymphatic system. And then I'm getting the red light therapy a couple times per week, which, it's obviously helping too because I have a relatively, low tox burden overall. So I think that's playing a role as well. It's just the continual detoxification.
That's great. So I want to talk about all the ways that you're addressing ovarian aging.
Yeah.
And I want to give a little context for this because what I see in the patients that I take care of, where I'm looking at genomics and I'm looking at biomarkers and whole body MRI
Hmm.
um, and tracking, some of the um, wearable data. What I see is that there's much more mitochondrial impairment than
Hmm.
people realize,
Yeah.
and it can start pretty young. The cells in the female body that have the highest number of mitochondria are eggs, are
Yeah.
oocytes.
Yeah.
So ovarian aging is a huge issue, and while I don't see definitive data on this, and a lot of it is preclinical and it's in
Hmm.
animals, I suspect that the rockiness, the dysregulation of perimenopause, some of that could potentially be avoided
Mm.
if we were
Yeah.
taking care of our mitochondria and this is the hypothesis, and we were focused on ovarian aging.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what have you learned? What's been your experience in working with ovarian aging? Where are you right now?
Yeah. A topic that I'm so excited about and just completely obsessed with, right? Because we know that not only for fertility reasons, but if our ovaries are aging faster, that also has a correlation to our lifespan, right?
Yes.
Because the ovarian function and the estrogen is really protective for women. So I want to say first that we have very limited data on this, from what I'm aware of, at least. And I've interviewed some really great, experts like Dr. Jennifer Garrison on this. And it's 2025, and I feel like we're just at the ground floor of
Yes.
really understanding number one, why do the ovaries age at twice the speed of other organs? But these are just hypotheses that I've, kind of talked with my medical team and advisors about, and just using, I guess, first principles thinking to think why might this be happening and how might I be able to target it. So outside of course, we have all the lifestyle factors, right? So just the high quality nutrition, the sleep and the exercise. That's like the foundation, I
Yeah.
think, for
The
any sort of
basics.
health.
Yes.
And so if your body is healthy, odds are, unless it's like a really outlying genetic abnormality, then, potentially the ovaries could be healthier as well. And by the way, when I speak to fertility specialists, it was really difficult to find fertility specialists that were open to having this conversation.
Isn't that ridiculous?
It's really wild because I was getting the same answer over and over and over, that because I wanted someone on my podcast and they're just like, "It's all genetic, that's what matters." And am like, "Okay, I don't believe this to be true. I know that you are the expert, but I just think that we could be more open-minded." So, things that I'm doing from ovarian aging and I am so excited to have this conversation with you just live because I don't know what your opinion is. So if we think about, the inflammatory cascade could be one potential reason. So we know that even during menstruation, we have this entire inflammatory cascade that occurs. Could that be a reason that the ovaries are aging a little bit faster? So what I'm thinking through in regards to that is I am doing red light therapy. So I'm actually doing low level laser therapy. So it's not just the panel. It's actually a more of a medical grade laser that can penetrate a little bit deeper because there were some interesting studies out of Japan that had infertile women they did this just proximal technique. So they're doing it on the neck, which is actually helped to reduce the inflammation systemically. And particularly, it seems to have helped the mitochondrial function of the ovaries because then they had, some of the participants had good outcomes. So I'm keeping that in mind. I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing proximal technique with a low level laser. So that's one thing that I'm thinking through is red light therapy to improve the mitochondrial function along with all the basic things, of course. I think nutrient status testing is something that I would put into this box because
And what do you like to use for nutrients?
yeah, I do the Nutri Eval.
Yes.
That's by Genova. So I love that test, and it's a great just measurement. So I don't really like to guess. Like I can be excited about all these supplements, and I have different buckets for supplements. So I have like my standard supplements, things like magnesium, vitamin D, fish oil, and I can talk about where I want my fish oil levels to be too. Maybe you have an opinion, but I've seen some interesting research on potentially longer lifespans with an omega index over 8. So I'm trying to keep my omega index around 10. And then I have my protocol supplementation box, which those are things I'm working on based on my gut test, my Nutri Eval, my total tox burden, and one of the couple of 200 other biomarkers I do. And then I have my longevity supplements. So those are things like NR, NAD, and spermidine, and Mitopure. Actually, we're talking about mitochondrial health. We know that urolithin A seems to be beneficial. So I have a pretty I would say intensive urolithin A intake. So I'm eating natto, which is super high, tastes horrible. It's sticky. I don't like it, but I'm doing natto for mitochondrial health as well. And always in my mind, I'm thinking that the oocytes have the highest density of mitochondria. So what can we do to optimize that to improve potentially ovarian aging?
And let me just also highlight for the men
Yeah.
that sperm have the
Mhm.
highest concentration of mitochondria. And so just as you described the disconnect that I see myself and my colleagues that are reproductive endocrinologists,
Mhm.
there's not been a focus on mitochondria in reproductive health, and there needs to be.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of the subfertility and infertility that we're seeing is
Mhm.
related to mitochondrial health.
Mhm.
So I just want to make sure people understand how critical this is. And even if you're a listener who's done with having babies,
Mhm.
this still impacts your health span, kind of the arc of post reproductive years,
Mhm.
what's happening with your body, because so many of these hormones that are related to egg quality, and I want to ask you about your baseline testing and
Yeah.
what you track over time, they are immunomodulators too,
Yeah.
such as estradiol.
Mhm.
Estradiol is the primary regulator of mitochondria.
Yeah.
So, do you, in terms of checking things like red light therapy and what you're doing to support your mitochondria, do you do like a day 3 FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and estradiol, AMH? Like, what are you tracking?
So I've mostly done AMH has been my primary measurement. The only unfortunate thing though is that when I started, so I have an AMH of about 5.8. I have zero markers of PCOS though, because we know that if it gets higher, it could be a concern, but all of my androgens are great. I've had the intravaginal ultrasounds, I've done the entire gamut and no issues with glucose or, insulin, anything of that nature. So unfortunately, I don't have a completely pre because I was already doing some red light therapy. But what I can say is through two things that I've done really intentionally, so that's outside of the diet and exercise nutrition, I did do a stint of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which this is all, again, this is not supported by data as of now. I do know people working on correlating AMH and hyperbaric oxygen. And then when I started the low level laser therapy, even though I've gotten older, so I got my first AMH when I was probably 32. So it was 2 years ago. So I'm obviously, getting older chronologically. But it actually went up a couple of points. So not in terms of the 5, but, it was, I think, 5.6 when we started. And then I did this hyperbaric protocol. And then I started doing the low level laser therapy. And I saw it go up to about 5.83. So, very just N of one, observational data, but I'm excited to see where the research goes with things like hyperbaric, I mean, so I learned about hyperbaric so many years ago for brain health and the potential to help people that had a concussion or brain injury. But as more data comes out, so we've also seen data to support that it can actually help lengthen telomeres, which are a measurement of, biological age. They're always changing, right? It's so new with all the biological clocks and what is validated and what is not. But telomeres were really popular, a little less popular now.
What do
But
you use for biological aging?
I'm doing the True Diagnostics test,
Yes.
but there's so many different ones,
Yes.
So honestly, I've talked to a lot of aging researchers too. And until we really get to a place that we feel solid about that, I think it's a good test to do. But also, things like gait speed and VO2 max and grip strength, those are more like the standard biomarkers, and they're easier to do at home, at least like the grip strength and the gait speed. So, but then there's so many different ones. There's like glycan age, and there's a lot of these individual labs have their own type of testing. But
Yes.
I think if you stick with one, you can at least see the variance, which is
Yes.
important.
Yes.
Um,
Are you using rapamycin?
I did. So I just started putting rapamycin into, which this is also, there's newest data saying that rapamycin can maybe increase biological age by a bit, but then there's also new data saying that it could potentially decrease ovarian aging by 5 years. The study has not been peer reviewed. It's very new, but I did incorporate, just based on those findings, rapamycin into my protocol. I don't think that there's been enough time passed yet to kind of see the difference. And also it's going to be a long study to really see what happens with me, because we also don't know egg quality. So we know that I have a high AMH, right? Good. No PCOS, good. The ultravaginal ultrasound looks great. I actually just did fertility preservation too. So I did egg freezing. So we can talk about that if you want. But my husband and I want to have a lot of kids. We would love to have like 5 or 6 kids. So everything looks great now, but I'm also trying to prepare for the future. Ideally, I, just extend ovarian health for a very long time, and we have all, our babies naturally, but we wanted to be prepared. I'm a big planner. So taking advantage of medical advancements as much as possible.
I love that.
So I went through that entire process. By the way, too, my doctor said she has never seen, so after I had the procedure, I went in on a Monday. I came in the next Monday, 1 week later, said she had never seen someone recover from the procedure and get as many eggs. So I got 27 mature eggs from that.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Thank you. And usually when you get that many eggs, you could potentially experience something called ovarian overhyperstimulation syndrome.
Yes.
And she actually predicted that I would have it. But I came in a week later and she's like, I've literally never seen this, but your ovaries are basically back to normal.
That's because you were managing your inflammatory tone.
Yes.
That's great.
And she was shocked. Like, she's like, I've literally never seen this. Typically, women come in 2 weeks later. So I was just 1 week later. And, it's still filled with blood. It's super inflamed. They're having all of these issues. And I had none of it. I did my own. I did the red light therapy. I did hyperbaric after the procedure. I, of course, maintained a good high protein intake. We didn't really talk about protein in my nutrition segment, but, I aim for about 100 grams of protein a day, or, 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. But maintained that. And yeah, she was so excited about the results. So, again, it's all N of 1 and it's just based on my own data, but it's exciting to see that some of these interventions may be playing a role. So I'm most excited about the red light therapy potential, or low-level laser therapy on ovarian aging. Let's see what the rapamycin does. I did something else that I'm concerned about even bringing it up because I really had no way to track it, but it's interesting. Should I?
Yes, please.
Should I talk about it? Can we cut this if we decide not to even talk about it?
Yes.
So, because let me think about the best way to say this. So I did something about a year and a half ago that unfortunately I don't have the pre data on all the numbers. But I did something called V cells, or very small embryonic-like stem cells. So it was derived from my own blood matter. These are supposed to be really small. They can even, bypass the blood-brain barrier. But I had those cells directed with a red light laser at my ovaries. Now, I suppose I'm trying to think through the best metric because my AMH didn't change that much. But that was another thing that I did during that time, from the 5.6 to the 5.8 that happened during that time. So I did do that. I'm interested to see where in general stem cells things like PRP, because I know a lot of my friends that are MDs will do like PRP to the ovaries, and there might be a potential benefit there. So I'm excited. Have you explored this at all?
I mean, I've been tracking the data. I haven't done it personally,
Yeah.
but I've been tracking the data. I'm
What do you
curious
think?
about it. It feels like we're still at the learning to crawl stage,
Mm-hmm.
but we need pioneers and leaders who are leading the way,
Yeah.
who are innovating and doing properly designed N-of-1 experiments
Mm-hmm.
so that we can then generate the hypotheses and test them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'll probably do it again, um, because I didn't see any negative effects. It's my own, blood matter, so I feel pretty good about that. Um, and it was just a red light laser, so I'm okay to do it again. So what I think I'll do the next time is, just have a little bit more because I'm learning as I go. We're finding new labs that my team's like, hey, do this or do that. But if we have maybe even we'll do like a Dutch, like the whole 9 yards, and of course the AMH, a pre and a post. And if I continue to do this cadence, then we'll see what happens with the ovarian aging. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing. Red light therapy, trying out hyperbaric, doing all the things to improve mitochondrial health overall, testing some of my mitochondrial markers. There's a
Which you
good
can get
one.
with a NutriVal.
Yep, a Nutrava. And there's even one too on the total tox burden. So you can kind of compare those two.
So, Kayla, I feel like I need to have a conversation with you maybe as often as you get your laboratory testing because I want to track, you're in a really dynamic time of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really curious what happens over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I don't want to wrap up our podcast today, but I have to. Could, for the listener who is intrigued by all the things that you're doing and maybe somewhat overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Could you suggest one thing that they could do to address longevity?
Go to bed early. Get high quality sleep. Because if you get a good night quality of sleep, not only from a biomarkers perspective you'll see improvements, but you're also going to have more motivation, more discipline to do all those other healthy habits on the following day. You'll have less cravings. You'll be more motivated to go to the gym. So go to bed early. Block out red light. We didn't really talk about my entire. I have a YouTube video that has my entire morning routine, my midday routine, my evening routine. But set yourself up for a high quality night of sleep and go to bed early.
So good. It's it's a benefit that's compounded in terms of what the day's like the next day.
Yeah.
So we'll link to your YouTube routines. So any final thoughts that you want to share?
I'm excited for the future of women's health. I mean, I'm so excited to be friends with someone like you who's just really leading the way. And I'm excited to continue to put out all my data. So my data is live. You can go to my website, kaylabarnes.com. I'm sure we'll link it. But I do post updates to my protocol, changes in nutrition, different therapies. I just did TPE, and I got a total toxic burn before. I'm going to do a total tox burn after. I'm excited about that therapy. But I post all these updates on all the things that I'm doing. Yep.
Electrophoresis.
Yeah. So they took out all my plasma. I think it was about 2.5 liters, replaced it with albumin. Your plasma will regenerate about over 24 to 48 hours fully. But they are showing that it's a significant decrease in toxic burden levels. So that could be a way to expedite it. But I'm always doing, these interesting type of different therapies. So I'm posting about it all the time online. And I just want to see what's possible. I want to be able to extend my, health span and lifespan and get some of the big blocks out of the way maybe for women so that the path can be slightly easier, less expensive, the whole 9 yards.
Yes, please. Did you feel different after the TPE?
I always feel so good. So it's so hard to know. But I mean, I had a great workout, the next day. So I'm excited to see the results though.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
Kayla.
for having me. Mm-hmm.